Well, children, I almost feel bad that I have to continue to tell you some stories. We learned about the polar bears. Maybe there are some that are adapting because it's hard for them to relocate. They're already way up there in the North Pole. They can't go anywhere anyways, so they have to adjust, and apparently some of them are. So we left the last podcast talking about the reindeer and how they can graze on these things. It's called a tundra at those latitude. Maybe I should pull up a figure of the tundra. Let's do that. You can watch my screen here. Okay, so let's go on Google and say tundra and see what images come up, remembering again that we cannot use commercially made available photos because you have to pay for them, but we will try to find free photos of the tundra. And here is something from the National Geographic Education. They won't mind if we use some of their images, do they? And I'm showing where the images are coming from. It's from the National Geographic, so let's hope they are tolerant of us using their images to learn about the tundra, except now I cannot find the tundra image. Here we go. Oh, you have to sign in, but where are the images, my friend? Tundra, tundra, tundra. There was a nice photo when I clicked on it and then it disappeared. They always do this. They trick you and they trick you and they trick you. So it's not always clear why they do that. Let's click on this image. So here is the tundra biome. That's what you have to look for and not just tundra. So this is what the tundra biome looks like. No tall trees, very colorful, and as you can imagine it will be all covered in snow as soon as fall arrives, and in winter it may be covered in much deeper snow. And there are the reindeer going around and trying to graze, and they can smell the tundra through the snow, but then if the snow turns into slush and freezes into hard rock like ice, then they have a hard time, as we talked about. But the reindeer also graze these things. These are not as bright, which means the albedo, I hope you can see it in the podcast, the albedo is lower, so it can get warmer, but when they graze it, they expose the land and increase the albedo by making a brighter surface exposed to the sun, and they keep it cooler, which is good for the polar bears as well. So everybody does this service. Reindeer have evolved to survive in the tundra through the winter as well, but they do what is called an ecosystem service. They help regulate the local climate in a way that they can survive. Some of the older ones among you may have learned about something called the Gaia. Gaia is where life and nature are interacting with each other and helping each other to an extent that life determines the nature. Well, some arguments about whether that's true. Does the environment exist before and then some species evolves, or does the species evolve and begin to modify the environment? These are kind of difficult questions, but you can ask your parents, your teacher, again your neighbors, siblings, friends, whoever, right? Not strangers. Be careful. Get permission from your parents to talk to people. So we were then talking about the yucca, because here is said for the polar bear, seal, and the Arctic fox too, and for the yucca. So if there were more reindeer, the polar bears would benefit because they increase the albedo, the seals would benefit because the sea ice wouldn't disappear, and the Arctic fox is of course happy because it depends on all these things together in the food web. And then how does it help the yucca? So last time I said I'll figure out how to pronounce this word yucca. Well, it turns out that it is called yucca. In Spanish and maybe some Hawaiians call it yucca, but most of the Americans and the Europeans seem to say yucca. Well, you say what you want, but remember what it is. And here is a guy riding his horse-dragged wagon into the Wild West looking for Joshua tree, right? So we'll talk about the yucca and the Joshua tree here. You might have one in your yard or in a pot somewhere in your home, a yucca plant, maybe even a yucca brevifolia. Each plant we know as mango, but there will be a botanical name because mango may not be mango everywhere, so you want to be sure there is a botanical name that corresponds to this tree that you think is mango, and everybody uses the same one. So yucca brevifolia is the name. If so, you should take good care of it because this plant is having a hard time. In the wild, it only grows in the desert in the southwestern United States. In the 19th century, when religious Americans were traveling across the desert in their wagon, they saw the tree for the first time. It reminded them of the prophet Joshua. Not because Joshua had green spikes on his head like this and hands, but because there is a Bible story about him stretching out his arms, and maybe he had spiky hair. So they called it the Joshua tree. The tree has such a striking appearance, as we'll see a real photo in a minute, that the whole area is now called the Joshua Tree National Park. But in a century there may not be any Joshua tree left here at all. That would be really, really sad, kids. You see, Joshua trees are good at withstanding heat and drought, otherwise they wouldn't be living in the desert like the camels. Give them a big downpour and it'll keep them going for a year. Talking about downpour, I'm having the monsoon. When it starts pouring, I'll turn the camera around and show you how it feels, how it looks. Maybe you are from India or some rainy region of Asia and you've already seen it, but if you haven't, then it's worth seeing. So give them a big downpour and it will keep them going for a year. In a desert, they're able to hold on to the water for a long time, and they have leaves that make sure that they don't lose that precious water. With their outspread branches and leaves, they don't let a drop escape when it rains under the ground. They also have meters of roots going down to absorb as much moisture as possible, because in the desert the water runs away, it doesn't stay for long, but the climate is becoming more unpredictable. Drought means there are more fires, and sometimes there is a very long wait for the rain, so the rain may not come even as often as a desert would expect it. The water also evaporates faster because remember, warm temperatures, warm atmosphere is thirsty atmosphere. It will suck up all the water from the vegetation, from the soil, from the sand, and so on. So water evaporates faster because the temperatures are higher, and this is a particular problem for the young trees. When you are growing up, you need a lot of food. Mom is making sure you're getting your milk, you're getting your protein, you're getting your nutrition. They don't have the branches and the roots when they are young, so they need to make the most of that one downpour, so they don't survive until the next one if there is no rain when they are still young and trying to grow up and waiting for this water and the downpour. This is bad news for Joshua trees, but also for the animals in the American desert. The black-tailed jackrabbit and the ground squirrel might be tough desert experts, but if drought lasts too long, they have to use their survival package. Just try to imagine. You may not be old enough to have learned a lot of biology or evolution, but these things have lived there for a long time, but so they know what to do when the season comes and when it's likely to rain, and what to do when it rains, how it rains, the downpour happens, and so on and so forth, right? So they have a tough desert. They are tough desert experts, and they have a survival package like a Boy Scout or a guide who knows how to survive in the mountain, and that's the Joshua tree. By sinking their teeth in its bark, right? So their desert package includes a Joshua tree, sorry. By sinking their teeth in its bark, they get enough moisture to survive. It's a desert, no water, but they can get water out of the bark of a Joshua tree. If there are no trees left, there is little creature. These little creatures will disappear too. Foxes, coyotes, and the birds of prey will be pretty bummed about that, because they are crazy about the little critters. That's what they eat. Yum, yum, yum. Without squirrels, hares, and rats, they will not survive. The desert will be dead, dull. So again, you can see that the survival of one species of tree is of vital importance for lots and lots of animals. Yay for the yucca, or yay for the yucca. Okay, if you're Spanish, you say how you say it and let me know. So here is a yucca tree, and there are all these critters, jackrabbits and ground squirrel and desert fox going around looking for water. Some predictions say that at the end of the century there will be only 10% of these trees left. That doesn't necessarily mean the end. Higher up in the mountains, the trees should manage better because it doesn't get as warm as at the surface, and maybe we can take some trees seed to the north, to Spitsbergen. That's what the giant sloth once used to do. It ate the seeds, walked a little way, and then pooped them back out. A perfect starter pack for a young Joshua tree. So it eats the seeds and digests whatever it can, and then poops out the seed somewhere else, and Joshua tree is happy to sprout out of it and grow. And that's how the ecosystem service is provided by a giant sloth. Everybody is doing their part. We need to do our part as well. But the giant sloth died out after the ice age. It needed those cold temperatures. See, so that's natural variability there for us. Where ice ages come, ice ages go away. The sloths move with the ice, and they just end up in the wrong place when the glacier disappears, and they go extinct because they cannot run back to chase this glacier back to where the glacier is still alive. And do you remember the movies Ice Age? I was told that there is now Ice Age 4, and there is always a sloth in there. I forgot the name. You can go and see the movie again with your parents and try to understand all those Ice Age animals, right? So the other thing we said here is we will look at the pictures of Joshua Tree. This is an image from the Joshua Tree National Park. I took it from the park website, so I'm sure they will allow me to use it without punishing me or penalizing me or complaining about it. So you can see this is a nice desert kind of vegetation. There's dry surfaces on the slopes where not much will grow, but you can still see something is growing, and there are some places where it's much drier because maybe they get not a drop of water. And there's the Joshua Tree, and there are other kinds of cactuses and shrubs growing, and some look dry already and some are still green. And we don't see any jackrabbit or a desert fox or a sloth, of course, around here. Sloths have disappeared, but I'm sure if you went hiking there, you would see a little critter here, a little critter there, and maybe a snake. Maybe there are snakes there, and so on and so forth, right? So we'll come back and look at the last golden toad. So you can imagine now that we are giving you mixed messages. We are saying in 100 years maybe a lot of the Joshua trees will die away, but even if 10% survive, maybe they can recover if we reduce global warming. And we are saying maybe the mountain tops will keep some trees alive, or maybe we'll take some seeds and store them in Spitsbergen. But the main thing to remember is when I say in 100 years what happens, we are making an estimate of what will happen if we continue to use fossil fuels, keep driving around in your cars that are burning fossil fuels, or have power plants that are burning coal, and we don't care about wasting energy and food and water and so on and so forth. But There are many options to reduce the fossil fuel use and have renewable energy, have electric vehicles, reduce energy use by using energy efficient appliances, refrigerators. The air conditioner will not be using greenhouse gas as a coolant anymore, and so on and so forth. So there are many options. So be optimistic, be positive, don't be anxious, don't get scared, and learn as much as you can and think about what you can invent to save people, to save animals, to save trees, save water, save food, make things more efficient, and take carbon out of the air, which is called carbon capture. Many good things can happen and are happening and will happen. So watch climate change carefully, watch climate change impacts carefully, but do not get scared, children. See you in the next podcast on, what did we say? The last golden toad. When you say the last golden toad, you think, oh, there is another species going extinct, but we'll see what the message is, okay? Come back!